When you visit the Alhambra, you enter into a most original and beautiful architectural world of words. The visual and semantic prominence of its devout, regal, votive and Quranic phrases and sentences, inscribed in a subtle variety of Kufic and cursive lettering, combined with the images of its mural verse and calligrams, turn it into a magnificent tridimensional manuscript, which converses with the water, the gardens and landscapes, imbuing the very buildings themselves with the sonorous vital rhythm of the Arabic language and its poetry. The walls of the Alhambra are the pages of a book. The similarity between the tiled dados in many of the rooms and the covers of the books of that time, with their artistic tracery and colouring, is no mere chance. The tiles protect and act as a foil to the mural texts in the same way that the covers do to the pages of the Quran and other courtly works. The stucco work itself shares the same decorative motifs and calligraphic forms as contemporary manuscripts. Including the small arches contained within some of the Kufic calligrams. The incorporation of words into the architecture leads to a symbolic transfiguration of the spaces it encloses. Look where you will, and you will find metaphors idealizing the figure of the Sultan who built them, and of the virtues of the palaces themselves. Other metaphors liken parts of the Alhambra to the stars in the firmament, or to gardens or heaven, in a similar way to the descriptions of paradise found in the Quran. Yet others, in nuptial vein, personify its rooms as brides prepared to welcome their lord. Their whole intent is to identify these royal courts as belonging to the Garden of Eden and isolate it from the reality outside, where decay, chaos, and evil abound. The door to the Meshwa, the very threshold of the royal palaces, is adorned with poetic symbolism in a brief qasida, inscribed in splendid Nazareth cursive lettering.
يا منصب الملك الرفيع ومحرز الشكل البديع، فتحت للفتح المبين وحسن صنع أو صنيع، أثر الإمام محمد ظل الإله على الجميع.
The facade to the Palace of Comares addresses the reader in the first person through a poem beneath its majestic wooden eave.
منصبي تاج وبابي مفرق، يحسد المغرب في المشرق، والغني بالله أوصاني أن أسرع الفتح لفتح يطرق، فأنا منتظر طلعته مثلما يبدي الصباح الأفق، أحسن الله له الصنع كما حسن الخلق له والخلق.
The ayah to the throne, inscribed below this poem, is one of the most fervent proclamations of the divine presence to be found in the Quran, and confers a solemn sanctity upon the palace.
الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم، لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم، له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم.
Inscriptions of verses from the Quran provide the buildings with sacred evocations of both the earthly and heavenly paradise, such as those in the oldest of the niches for jars of water in the Alhambra, at the entrance to the hall of the Potala palace. Their thirst will be slaked with pure wine sealed to others. The seal thereof will be musk, and for this let those who aspire, who have aspirations, with it will be given a mixture of water of tasnim, or inscribed upon the wooden cornice in the north portico of the Generalife.
ليدخل المؤمنين والمؤمنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين.
But it is in the hall of Commodores, built in honor of Yusuf I, where a passage from the Quranic surah on divine sovereignty, painted in white upon the wooden cornice beneath the ceiling, acquires its greatest architectural dimension.
تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير، الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور، الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فأرجع البصر هل ترى من فطور، ثم أرجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير.
Thus we are told that the ceiling reproduces the 7 heavens of the celestial Islamic paradise, the light of which emanates from the divine throne at its center. The symbolic meaning of the hall as a royal seat is completed by the poem inscribed in the central alcove.
تحييك مني حين تصبح أو تمسي ثغور المنى واليمن والسعد والأنس، هي القبة العليا ونحن بناتها، ولكن لي التفضيل والعز في جنسي، كساني مولاي المؤيد يوسف ملابس فخر واصطناع بلا لبس، وصيرني كرسي ملك فأيدت علاه بحق النور والعرش والكرسي.
This poem forms the hub of the poetic axis of the royal palace of Commodores, the building of which was completed by Muhammad V when he added the hall of the boat and the courtyard of the myrtles, a thematic axis composed of 11 courtly poems, 8 of which still remain just as they were originally inscribed. Muhammad's court poet Ibn Zamrak composed the 9 mural qasidas, which together with their courtly and paradisical references stand out particularly for their nuptial metaphors, such as those in the niches in the doorway between the hall of the boat and the courtyard of the myrtles.
أنا مجلاة عروس ذات حسن وكمال، فانظر الإبريق تعرف فضل صدقي في مقالي.
And once again in the following arch forming the entrance to the hall of Commodores.
رقمت أنامل صانعي ديباجتي من بعد ما نظمت جواهر تاجي، وحكيت كرسي العروس وزدته أني ضمنت سعادة الأزواج.
The adjoining Palace of the Lions, also built by Mohammed V, is arranged around another north-south poetic axis, which from the Mirador of Lindaraja passes through the Fountain of the Lions and joins the halls of the Two Sisters and the Abencerrajes. It originally comprised 10 poems, 5 of which have since disappeared. Most of them speak to the palace itself as the garden, the ideal architectural concept, as in this poem by Ibn Zamrak, inscribed in the great cupola of the Garden of Happiness, the Hall of the Two Sisters, which begins in this way.
أنا الروض قد أصبحت بالحسن حاليا، تأمل جمالي تستفد شرح حاليا.
The poem also relies on a profusion of astral metaphors.
In the cupola, such splendour does the chamber acquire that the palace competes with the very firmament. They seem to be arches of turning celestial spheres that even cast a shadow upon the pillar of the dawn when it breaks.
It is all inscribed in the most beautiful Nazareth cursive lettering, especially within the rectangular cartouches.
به المرمر المجلو قد شف نوره، فيجلو من الظلماء ما كان داجيا.
There, gleaming, polished marble lights up the darkness of the shadows.
And in the neighbouring Mirador of Lindaraja, Mohammed V's throne room and viewpoint from which he could watch over the city, you can read,
In the heavens of the kingdom he appears like the full moon of religion. His works go on, his light glows. He is no other than the sun in a mansion, in which he, to all good, gives shade. The crystal heaven reveals marvels there, which are written down on the page of beauty. One is the light, many the colours, opposed or the same, as you will.
So, the Fountain of the Lions exalts the ideal garden and its builder through the symbolic concept of water.
تبارك من أعطى الإمام محمدا معاني زانت بالجمال المغانيا، وإلا فهذا الروض فيه بدائع أبى الله أن يلفي لها الحسن ثانيا، ومنحوتة من لؤلؤ شف نورها تحلي بمرفض الجمان النواحيا، بذوب لجين سال بين جواهر غدا مثلها في الحسن أبيض صافيا، تشابه جار للعيون بجامد فلم ندر أيا منهما كان جاريا. ألم تر أن الماء يجري بصفحها ولكنها سدت عليه المجاريا، كمثل محب فاض بالدمع جفنه وغيظ ذاك الدمع إذ خاف واشيا. وهل هي في التحقيق غير غمامة تفيض إلى الآساد منها السواقيا، وقد أشبهت كف الخليفة إذ غدت تفيض إلى أسد الجهاد الأياديا. فيا من رأى الآساد وهي روابض عداها الحيا عن أن تكون عواديا، ويا وارث الأنصار لا عن كلالة تراث جلال يستخف الرواسيا. عليك سلام الله فاسلم مخلدا تجدد أعيادا وتبلي أعاديا.
While While most of the poems are inscribed in cursive lettering, also outstanding is the use in the Alhambra of richly ornamental Kufic calligraphy in many of the exclamatory phrases and sentences. The decorative elements of foliate and floral motifs, which by then had already been incorporated into the repertoire of Kufic script, were even further embellished here with swashes and upward strokes in the shape of columns, plaiting, plain and scalloped arches, and enjambment, all of which create meta-architectural designs, which, while they cloud the walls, evoke at the same time cunningly attractive imaginary structures. These are the architectural calligrams. The simplest of these use one of the most frequently repeated expressions in the Alhambra, baraka, a blessing. The second two letters of the word form an arch, which accommodates the first two in a symmetrical construction. Similar calligrams to this fill the walls of the Alhambra, even in its most hidden corners. Yumn, good fortune, is also to be seen wherever you look, appearing in friezes of mogarabes and cornices, interspersed between rhomboid sebka designs, and accompanying shields or other expressions, and very often repeated in mirror image. In the Hall of Comares, for instance,
الله عد لكل شدة.
God provides in all adversity, written here with Allah at the bottom and Udda above it, the letters of Allah being extended upwards into plaited peaks and arches that circumscribe the rest of the composition, all of which is set off by foliate motifs. Above the capitals in the meshwa, you will see another commonly used expression in the Alhambra.
الغبطة المتصلة.
Perpetual happiness. Forming three scalloped arches. Sometimes Al-Gibta is written in Kufic at the bottom, from whence upward strokes create plaited peaks, a false arch and a cartouche that holds the word Al-Mutasila. The whole design is filled in with decorative foliate motifs.
ولا غالب إلا الله.
Worthy of special attention is the Nazareth Motto,
ولا غالب إلا الله.
There is no victor but God, which, it is said, was taken by the first Nazareth Caliph from the standard raised by the Almohad Sultan, Al-Mansur, at the Battle of Al-Aqos. Whilst its typical version in cursive script is ubiquitous throughout the Alhambra, inscribed in friezes both short and long, on surrounding arches and windows, painted on wooden cornices and running along the tops of walls, its Kufic counterpart forms interesting calligrams in many corners. Here in the pendentives of the Hall of the Two Sisters, creating a tripartite portico. In the arches above the entrance into the halls of the Abencerrajes and the Two Sisters, it is at the center of a delightful triple arch, accompanied by baraka. On the entrance to the mirador of Lindaraja, the calligram changes subtly, with Allah forming the base, and the rest of the design being completed with plaits, arches, and foliate motifs. In the Potala Palace, a singular composition begins with the first half of the motto, Wala Galib, in broad Kufic lettering, forming two stylized trees, and the second half, Ila Allah, in smaller Kufic script, tracing scalloped arches, a composition which is repeated twice in each panel. Frequently, the calligrams are not isolated, but are repeated to form rows of false arches or porticos. In the mihrab of the Potala oratory, 2 calligrams are combined.
الله عد لكل شدة.
God provides in all adversity develops into 3 architectural levels, housing foliate elements and an upper cartouche, in which is written, "Praise be to God for the bounty of Islam." Beside this, another calligram containing
الملك لله.
"Sovereignty belongs to God" forms a similar structure containing other expressions in cursive script. Their repetition creates the illusion of a gallery within the mihrab itself. Perhaps the most complex single calligram is to be found inscribed within the central tympanum in the mirador of Lindaraja. It comprises the sentence, "Glory be to our Lord the Sultan.
أبي عبد الله الغني بالله.
May God sustain his authority and perpetuate his felicity," from which derives an intricate structure housing stylized trees and 3 expressions written in cursive script. To the right, "Praise be to God for the bounty of Islam." To the left, "Praise be to the one God." And then, "Thanks be to God." And in the middle, "God is the best protector, and He is the most merciful one. God the highest has spoken the truth." The combination of Kufic and cursive epigraphs with other elements sometimes forms highly symbolic fables, such as those in the alcoves of the north portico of the courtyard of the Myrtles, where a series of architectural calligrams of Al-Gibta al-Mutasila, perpetual happiness, runs along an elegant dado of tiles that imitate the swell and flow of water. These are flanked by pairs of small columns which appear to support the mokarabes of the cornice, upon which is written Yumn, "Good fortune" repeated in mirror image, and "Glory be to our Lord Abu Abdallah," thus creating a stucco portico in words, which together with the impression of water given by the tiled background reproduces in 2 dimensions the architecture of the courtyard itself, complete with garden and ornamental pool. Above it, a frieze of Nazareth mottos gives rise to another, containing royal shields surrounded by the same motto, and above these, more complex architectural calligrams composed of the Quranic expression, "Victory only comes with God, the powerful, the wise," forming a base for the vault of mokarabes, amongst which are written in Kufic script, "Alauda," God provides, and "Baraka," a blessing. If you gaze at these calligrams rising up from the surface of the undulating tiles, you will be aware of how they become an enticing architectural illusion before your eyes. Eventually, the decorative lines of arches and stretches of sebkas include within themselves inscriptions and calligrams, creating beautiful, highly complex designs, in which the Kufic inscriptions act as a basis to generate the geometric patterns. And in this way, the word becomes the origin of the decorative universe, the creative womb of the world. Thus, in the Hall of Comares, an extensive panel of interwoven arches is the product of a combination of calligrams of Al-Mulk Lillah. Sovereignty belongs to God, with Lillah at the bottom and Baraka, a blessing, repeated upwards, joined by a series of scalloped arches, which in turn are interspersed with another of plain round arches. And in a panel characteristic of the Palace of the Lions, Baraka, repeated in mirror image, creates a base to support a series of intertwined calligrams of
الله عد لكل شدة.
God provides in all adversity. Where these stretches cross decorative strands in the form of sebkas, you can read the exclamation, Aliza Lillah, glory belongs to God. Filling all the gaps and spaces, dense foliate and floral motifs complete a vividly rich and intensely rhythmic picture. To read and feel the Alhambra is therefore to enter into a magnificent garden book, in which the architecture, written and constructed in words, emanates from the spring of classical Arabic poetry and the creative word. Never has architecture been so communicative and poetic as it became in the hands of the Nazareth builders, and never have words and poetry been embodied in architecture with such subtlety and intensity as in the Alhambra.
به المرمر المجلو قد شف نوره فيجلو من الظلماء ما كان داجيا.
تصبح أو تمسي ثغور المنى واليمن والسعد والأنس هي القبة العليا.
تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير، الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور.